symptoms we experience in our bodies are an inescapable part of life. Do we want to be at war with them? Considering these symptoms are us, I vote no. 40 years ago, Dr. and author Ruediger Dahlke wrote an insightful book, The Healing Power of Illness. He and co-author Thorvald Detlefsen predate the new age of medicine and shine a bright light on the healing path. Did you know, not unlike a virus or a bacteria, good health is contagious and it can be caught? This is Robin here with Ruediger today on Tributaries. Ruediger, thank you so much for sharing some time with us today.
Yeah, I enjoyed and looking forward to present this work to the U.S.
Wonderful. Before we move into the premise of your book, The Healing Power of Illness, would you share a little bit about your co-author, Thorvald Detlefsen, as he brought the work of an esotericist into a medical view?
Yes, I worked together with Thorvald for 12 years and knew him before. He was a psychologist, and this work about the diseases and the symptoms and the symbols they present started with me. The psychotherapy I did with Thorvald Detlefsen together, we called it shadow therapy. It's more or less, maybe you know it from Debbie Ford or Byron Katie. They do also work with the shadow. And we found that the body is like a stage for all the things which we don't accept on our consciousness level. So we just translated the body language to a psychological language. We did this on many holidays together. So in the Philippines, in India, and wherever we went on holidays. And we worked together during this interpretation time. And also I did psychotherapy in the team with Thorvald Detlefsen. He has passed away long ago already. And this book was the only thing he did with medicine in this way. Otherwise, he was in psychotherapeutic thinking and what we called in those days esoteric thinking, spiritual. His interest was more or less spiritual.
I like the idea that on vacation you all were doing all of this sort of thing.
I mean, those sort of vacations we just did a lot of discussions, and even in the planes we were talking about our psychotherapy. We created a different way of psychotherapy. I had hundreds of hours of analytic psychotherapy. I wanted to become a psychoanalytic, but we found out that it's too long and too insecure. So we created a new form of psychotherapy, and on this way we came to the problem that people who were obstipated, they couldn't get along so well in the psychotherapy. And then we found out that when they didn't give up things on this body level from their intestines, it's also difficult for them to bring out the shadow world on the consciousness level. And that's how the whole thing started.
It's a wonderful, wonderful book. Early on, you state almost as a warning that you are leaving the sphere of scientific medicine behind and claim that academic medicine itself is sick. I'm wondering if you would speak a little bit about that, and is it because it focuses only on the physical body?
Yes, it's mostly because of this. A human being is, of course, and almost everybody knows this, more than a machine. This is the way René Descartes made his definition, or Isaac Newton did it. It's like a mechanic way of looking at things. But nowadays, we have completely different viewpoints. We know from the new physics that we are much more than this mechanical system. So I think everybody knows that his body is connected to his soul. And there are so many consciousness things we nowadays by science connected with the body. For example, if I give you a a medicine against the reaction of the body with the psyche, like blockage medicine, like Valium, diazepine. And I tell the guy that when he takes this medicine, he will have erectile dysfunctions, like impotentia. If I tell him, then 30 from 100 will have this erectile dysfunction. If I don't tell them, only 2 from 100. So you can see what huge difference the psyche makes. In our days now, it's even much more ridiculous to see a human being only as body. But in those days, when we made this book, it was in the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, it was still quite common that university medicine sees people only like machines. That was what we meant, that this medicine is sick. It's looking only at one part of us. Of course, body is important. We need a body. If we don't have a brain, we can't talk and we can't think. But it's not only the body. Consciousness is much more. For me, if I remember my study time and the time in the hospitals and the clinics, it was like, they went into the body by operating, the surgeons, and they didn't find the soul. So it's almost like if you open a television set and say, I couldn't find a program, there is no program. It's in a way, for us, it seemed ridiculous, even in those days. But today, I think it's not so revolutionary anymore, because so many doctors have understood that there is a psyche, and it's very, very important. All the placebo medicine and the nocebo medicine is telling us this. There was this American guy who made this orthopedic operation, and he had a big group of patients, and one part of the group was really operated in the old-fashioned way, and the other was operated with a new orthopedic setting. The old thing was the arthroscopy, and he made a new thing, a method to just clean the joint. And then there was a third group, and they did nothing with them. They faked an operation. In the end, all the 3 groups had the same good effects. And this guy was really courageous, and he made it public and said, what's there? What happened? And the only thing we can say, if you look at this, what all 3 groups had together was a ritual and their psyche reacting to operation. Because also the third group, they thought they had an operation, but they didn't. So we can tell a lot of such stories today, and we can see the psyche is very, very important. And also this way of looking at diseases is now in German-speaking countries, but also in 28 languages this exists. It's quite popular in countries like Italy or Hungary. Lately I was in Brazil, and I was astonished how many Brazilian psychiatrists, psychologists, and also doctors know about this. I heard that in Mexico they even use it at university medicine. It depends on the country and in which way the book is published. If the books are published on this spiritual level, then they don't enter into university medicine. But there are some countries where it is published in normal medical editions, and then they accept it more. Strange this way, but functions like that.
Yes, well, it is very interesting. And you say that when you wrote this book in the late 70s, it was more revolutionary. And of course, I have to agree, but even reading this book today, it's very eye-opening. So it definitely still has some revolutionary aspects to it, even in today's world. And, you just mentioned Brazil. My gosh, the things that go on in Brazil with medicine are so fantastic and kind of out of this world, with people like John of God. And I don't know if he's been made out to be a fraud or not, but I know that there are so many little sects of medicine down there and practitioners that borders on magic in a way.
Yeah, I met Edson Queiroz. It was a surgeon. He did surgery without any analgesics and in a strange way. It was really plain magic. John of God, I think what they accuse him of is that he misused women, not that he is a fraud. There were so many healings, even quite registered quite well. We have this today even in university medicine. Decades ago, Carlyle Hirschberg, an American lady, and she had such a assembly of spontaneous remissions with cancer. And we have this here too. I just wrote a book about cancer and I went deeper into this, and we have so many examples of miracle healings or spontaneous remissions, like university medicine calls it. So the old way of looking at diseases, even like cancer and heart attacks, is changing. It changed already a lot in the United States with Caldwell Esselstyn, Colin Campbell, that they say nutrition is so very, very important for this. That's what we said all the decades. But now they have even this scientific proof. And we will have the next step. We will have to accept that the psyche is so important. I'm sure for this.
Yes, oh, absolutely. Do you think that this academic or Western medicine is fear-based?
Yeah, more or less. Look how they act. So if you don't do the vaccination then, and they threaten the mother. And if you don't go to this, what they called prevention, prophylaxis, if you don't do that then, and they threaten people. And the problem is with university medicine, they can do no prevention because they have no idea of the illness, of the way the illness is functioning. What they do is they want to do very early diagnosis. But this is a misuse of the word prevention or prophylaxis. With the medicine of this book we are referring to, you can really do prevention. You can act in a way that you don't get this illness at all. But with university medicine, you can just detect the illness very early, the first symptoms. But this is completely different. It's not prevention. It's not prophylaxis.
Yes, yes. And regarding healthcare, whether using Western or academic, as we're calling it today, medicine, or alternative complementary medicine, there's still a narrow path with a resisting illness rather than using it. And I know that you speak about this a lot in the Healing Power of Illness, and I'm wondering if you would address this just a little bit here today.
If you fight things, you make them stronger with this. It's all the same. So we fought the Russians and you fight the Russians, and we're not allowing to make any trade with them. But what I heard by a German professor of trade, he said they get stronger and stronger by this because they have to rely on themselves. But I have it also here in our house, for example. These people who lived here before us, they fought the insects, the kakerlaks and all this, with a huge amount of chemicals. And when we came in here, we threw all the chemicals away and cleaned the house really radically. And now we have no kakerlaks anymore here. Cockroaches, or how do you call them?
Yes, cockroaches. I like kakerlaks, though. That's a fun word.
So it's just clean here. And since almost a year, we don't have had one. When we came here, we first found 20 of them. And the fighting with the chemicals makes them stronger in a way. They react to it. It's like with the antibiotics. We are now almost in a worse situation than before detecting antibiotics, before Fleming. Because by using so many antibiotics in the hospitals and also in this mass production of meat in these huge, you cannot say farms anymore, factories, we have produced so many resistant germs that the situation is even worse. So this complementary medicine I would prefer very much is working with the symptoms and with the disease, understanding it, and by understanding it, changing the situation and putting it in the content of your whole life. You know, the university medicine is very good in pathogenesis. They know very well how things happened, looking back to the past. But they have not the slightest idea about salutogenesis, how people could get healthy again. And for that, we have to understand what's going on. This guy, Aaron Antonovsky, who made this word, salutogenesis, told us this. First, you have to understand the whole thing, then you can change it. If you're not understanding what's behind it, you won't change it. You can take every example. If you look up for cancer, problem or the theme behind cancer is growth. It's growth on a very bad level. But if we understand this and we start to grow on other levels, like consciousness level, soul level, spiritual level, then you make it much easier to get rid of the cancer. And then you can also use what we call complementary or alternative medicine by making the immune system stronger, not fighting it with all these chemotherapies. With the chemotherapy, of course, we can destroy maybe 60, 70, 80, even 90%, and very rarely 100% of the cancer cells. But if there's only 5% left over, there is new American science which tells us that by radiation and chemotherapy, we just change this rest of the cancer cells by becoming stem cancer cells. And from them, the cancer is growing again. And we know this. The second cycle of the chemotherapy is much less successful than the first. Third is almost just for nothing, just for having bad times for the patient. So this fighting system is not really working well. You can see this even on the political level. Do you really think that we did something good in Afghanistan? That they are now more fond of the US people or the Germans? I'm sure it's the contrary. We spent so many lives and also money, but we couldn't reach the goal, the aim. It's always the same thing. By your music, your philosophy, the pursuit of happiness, you won so many more countries. It goes just easy. Yeah, the Vietnam War, if you look back at this, on the battlefields, that was really not a success. But I was twice, 3 times even, in Vietnam. You won it anyway, but more with your pop songs, with the way of your thinking, the way of your free trading system, but not on the battlefield. So I think we find it all over, that fighting is not the real thing. Look in the relationship. If you fight your partner, it won't come out very happy, the whole thing. But if you try to understand and then to change first yourself, then chances are wonderful. Yeah. We have examples for that all over. I'm really astonished that it took so long to understand this. I mean, here for the German-speaking world and for Europe, I'm quite happy with this. And also the Spanish world. But for me, it's really strange that we still try to fight our enemies and not realizing that we don't make them weak by this. We even make them adjust to our fighting ways and becoming stronger by this. So I think in medicine, this is completely clear, because now if I go to Congress and also with university guys, they agree that the situation has become worse by using too much antibiotics. This is nothing we have to fight about today anymore. More than 40 years ago when we wrote this book, then this was different. University medicine was the only one, and they were so proud of all their successes. But now if we look at the whole battlefield, we see we won every battle. And we are about to lose the war.
Right. Ruediger, I loved that you talked about the best companions to bring on the journey out of academic medicine into the human soul are pictorial thinking, fantasy, association, irony, and an ear for the linguistic backgrounds. Could you maybe just talk about one of those things or how they relate?
Yeah, they are also important for me, all you mentioned. I think what we have to face is a paradigm change from this male way of seeing the world to a more female way of viewing the world. It's not by numbers. It's more by pictures. If you look at your history lessons you had in school, do you remember any numbers? What we remember is pictures. So from childhood on, we have the fairy tales, and they are really important. They are really like nutrition for the soul of the child. And thanks God that we still get them back. I mean, we are not good in mythology anymore, but we have the Hollywood movies. Most people don't know the Iliad and the Odyssey of Homer, but almost every young kid knows Troya, and Troya is the Iliad. And since Brad Pitt is the Achille in this movie, almost everybody is a fan of the Iliad and shows us these old pictures. We have the Odyssey also as a movie, and these things are coming back. And I'm very happy that we have them. For example, I prescribe much more movies than medicines.
I love it.
And I even wrote a book about it. It doesn't exist in English, but it's called The Hollywood Therapy, with hundreds of really wonderful movies. Yeah. If you look at a movie like The Bucket List with Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson, every cancer patient of mine has to look at this movie and has to put paper beside him and a pencil and do his bucket list. And at the end of this movie, even people who have no cancer will feel good. Although there was no fighting, there were no sex scenes. It's just two men fighting their cancer, the one surviving because he is confronting his shadow, Jack Nicholson, and the other going because he couldn't do that, Morgan Freeman. But in the end, everybody knows we don't have to wait until we get a cancer diagnosis or until the chemo didn't function. We could just start right now making the best out of our life. And there are so many movies, and they live from the pictures. So it's so important. And also with the irony, if a patient can laugh a little bit about himself and the tricks he plays himself and the way he doesn't want to look at the real problems, if you can bring him to this point, that he can laugh about himself. You should never laugh about him. This is, of course, wrong. But if he can do that, it's such a good thing. And you remember the late Carl Simonton. I knew him. I met him in several Congress situations. He had even a scientific study which showed that if we work on the soul picture level with a patient, with these inner journeys, then surviving cancer is more as twice as long. In those days, it was in the last century when Carl Simonton made this study, it was almost not seen. It was not of interest for university medicine. But I think in our days now, they realize, and especially the women are realizing this. You know, we have already a change in the clinics in Austria, in Germany. There are so many more women nowadays, or in Sweden even more. And they are more interested in psychic things and interested in the psychological level and also for psychosomatic. The archetypical male way is just in doing, operating, producing health. But the archetypical female way is much more understanding that it's nature, Mother Nature, who is healing. Like the old saying, the Latin saying, medicus curat natura sanat. The doctor can only cure in a way that he presents a situation where Mother Nature can do the healing. Yeah. So I think we come back to this, and time is right for that. Also, when I was in the States, in Esalen or in Omega Institute, there's many people nowadays open for this, especially in these centers. Of course, this is their theme. But I can see it even in the scientific community. They open up to things which were incredible 20, 30, 40 years ago. So this is a time I see In the medicine field, I see it very hopeful.
Absolutely. You talk about relearning the language of symptom and how this requires a new level of honesty to ourselves and to others. And I guess that's what you mean by looking at the shadow and really just taking an honest look, yes?
Yes. I mean, this honesty thing is one of the most important things, that we are honest with ourselves. But we haven't learned this. We have learned to present us better than we are. And we have to learn to look at the real one, me. And this is, in a way, a little bit or even more disappointing. But this is really important. I can see in the deeper level of any symptom that it has something to do with me. And I can even learn from this, and I would strongly recommend to do this. If you see at this obesity thing we have it even more than we have it here. But also in Germany, more than half of the women want to lose weight and becoming more and more all the time. So if you look at this, what we need is a round life, a complete life. Satisfying life, a fulfilled life. This is even a Christian saying. And we do it on the body level. We become round on a level which is really, really insane. And I've accompanied so many people on this way of losing weight until they come to their individual best weight. And they're always happy in the end if they reach this goal. And the thing is always the same. We shouldn't become round on the outside level, but inside, making our life complete and looking at our gifts and give them. That's what's making us happy. And if you look only on the material level, then it doesn't work. If you compare the United States with Bhutan, do you know Bhutan?
Of course.
Bhutan has one very similar thing in their constitution, like your First Amendment, I think, the pursuit of happiness. And the Bhutanese people have the same. But the Bhutanese people think of this not on a materialistic way. They think it on a spiritual level. And although they are really, really poor compared to the US, but if you travel to both countries, which I do, then you see much more happy people in Bhutan than in the United States.
I've always heard that we cannot judge our own spiritual progress, and you write that the self-evaluation is dishonest, and I think those two fit together in that way that we can't quite know. We don't know enough of the pieces.
Yeah. That is true. On the other hand, we can walk only where we are. If we are not honest with us, and if we don't look at the situation we are really in, we can't change the situation. So I think it's so important and stays important that we get honest, more honest, and see what mess we have.
We'll join Dr. Ruediger Dahlke next week for the conclusion of this interview regarding his book, The Healing Power of Illness. For any guest information, to listen to archives, share resources, or sign up for weekly programming, it's tributariesradio.wordpress.com. Podcasts are on iTunes as Tributaries Radio. I'm Robin Clare. Thanks for staying tuned.